Welcome everybody back to Pepe's channel here on YouTube. Appreciate you coming by. Hey, today we're going to talk about this plant called Chinotto. Can you say Chinotto? Go ahead, say it. Chinotto, Chinotto. Here we go. We're going to talk about this plant and how you can grow it in a container. So now, if I told you that this plant has a history that dates back to the 1600s, what do you think about that? Yep, it is. It's a citrus plant from China, okay, that was brought to Italy in the 1600s by a sailor. It's actually an heirloom if you really think about it, because dating back to the 1600s, it's really a special thing to have in your garden, don't you think? Now, here's why you would want to grow it. A couple of reasons. Number one, it's fairly easy to grow. Pretty good in terms of pest resistance and disease resistance. I grow them in Florida. Actually, I shouldn't say I grow them in Florida. I grow one of these in Florida. And the reason for that is that we don't propagate a lot of citrus because the state has a lot of regulations on propagation of citrus due to many diseases. But that's another episode. If you harvest a Chinotto fruit, you're not going to be grabbing your little knife and cutting it up and eating it out of hand necessarily, unless you really like a very bitter fruit, because it's pretty bitter. Now, the idea of growing it for the fruit is primarily to make candies, to make jams, jellies, and to make other types of desserts, dried fruit and things like that. They also make it in San Pellegrino, and I believe it's one of their drinks. It's actually called Chinotto. It contains the flavoring of Chinotto. Now, you don't necessarily have to grow it in a container if you don't want to. You can grow it as a nice plant in the ground. It's going to be an average of about 6 to maybe 8 feet maximum, with about a 2 to 3 foot width. That's typically how they grow. And as I said, they're European, from Italy, Spain, and by the way, they're very cold hardy. So if you're up north, you know, and you want to grow it outdoors, you're good until about 25 degrees. So 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So you want to keep that in mind. But it's pretty cold hardy and does really well either in a pot or in the ground. Now, this guy is actually in a bonsai pot. I'm not shaping him or training him or doing anything, and I keep calling it him, sorry ladies. So I'm not training it to be a bonsai. I'm just growing it in the container because, hey, I thought, you know, it'd be interesting to see what would happen, and it turns out that it's 5 years later and this fella's doing great. Now, to keep this Chinotto nice and healthy, what I do is I make sure that I take out the weeds. I don't leave any weeds in there. I use a couple of different organic pesticides, and I also use a very good organic fertilizer. Now, there's many organic fertilizers out there. Try to find one that's specifically for citrus, and you'll be in good shape. One other thing you're really going to need for citrus trees is you're going to need a nutritional supplement that's basically minerals. So you're going to need your micronutrients and your macronutrients. So you can get a foliar liquid micronutrient spray, and you can treat the plant with that several times throughout the year, sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the winter. But if you do that, and remember, in the summer is when you really want to give it the maximum amounts of nutrition spread out over a period of time. Smaller quantities on a regular basis is more important than heavy doses, and then forget about the tree. All right, so let me just briefly touch on some of the pests that you're going to encounter with your tree. Some of the things that you're going to deal with are going to be aphids. They're really not that difficult to get rid of. You can simply take a hose and give it a really good spray and come back the next day. If you still see some on there, hose it off real well again with the hose and sprayer, and you should be able to tackle those aphids. You always want to keep an eye out for ants. If you see a lot of ants hanging around your tree, going up and down your branches, it's not a good sign. You should inspect immediately and look for scale, and again look for aphids that may be feeding on your plant by actually sucking the sap out of your plant. So aphids and scales are a challenge. I would say the scales are a little more difficult to control, but you can definitely do it with lots of organic products that are available. You're also going to have a citrus leaf miner. A citrus leaf miner is a real troublemaker. His life cycle starts in the soil and basically ends up coming out of the soil, flying onto the leaf, laying its egg, dropping out of the leaf, back into the soil, and it's a vicious cycle. So what happens is that in the winter months, it's not too bad, and in the summertime, or actually say in the spring and summer, it's furious. It's really, really bad. and you really need to control it, because ultimately it weakens your plant and it creates damage to the leaves, where diseases can, diseases are more likely to enter if you have this perforations and tunnels that the leaf miners leave in your plant. So spinosad is one product that I recommend, but read the label and use it responsibly, because it can affect bees. So if you see bees flying around your plants, consider spraying it when the bees aren't around. Make sure it doesn't drift onto everything. Use it where you need it. Don't use it all over the yard, okay? Only where you really have a problem. With that said, if you use spinosad, that will work very well on the leaf miner, probably better than anything I've ever seen. Now, you can also use BT, which is called Bacillus thuringiensis, but that stuff there is very selective and doesn't do much when it comes to the leaf miner. It will kill lots of other, caterpillars and so on, but leaf miner, special situation right there. They're very small, they're deep inside the leaf, and the only thing that seems to get them real good is the spinosad. All right, now it's time for Q&A. All right, here we go. I want to ask you guys one question. Number one, if you like the video, please consider giving us a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Hit that little button down there that says subscribe, and there's a little bell next to it. If you hit the bell, you'll get all the updates on the future videos. All right, so here you go. You want to have fruit, okay, you got to have sunlight, okay? It's very important that your plant gets as much sunlight as possible so that you can maintain a good cycle of growth and production of energy, so that you can get plenty of fruit on your little plant. Chinotto is self-fertile, so that's great. It can produce fruit without having two different varieties of oranges around the yard, or two different Chinottos. It can produce fruit all by itself, okay? So keep that in mind, and again, the sunlight is very important. Your soil needs to be, if it's in a container, a potting soil. Critically important that you use a potting soil, and you can keep your pH just a little bit below 7, maybe 6.5, 6, you'll be fine, okay? Make sure it's well-drained soil, whether it's in a container, and if it's in the ground, obviously, you want to have a well-drained soil as well, but you do want to make sure that your plant's getting water on a regular basis, but give it a little bit of time to dry out so that you don't end up with root rot. Now, talking about soil, let's talk about root stock for a minute. What is a root stock? This red tag indicates that this citrus tree was grafted onto a root stock, which is called obovideo. Now, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I kind of botch things up sometimes when I'm speaking, and I'll say something, but I'm pretty certain it's obovideo. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I've grafted citrus, or even grown a lot of citrus, or had a lot of dealings with citrus. But if I'm not mistaken, it's a type of a grapefruit. And the rootstock is what is basically the foundation of the plant. So your rootstock is what a scion, a piece of the productive mother plant, in this case the Chinotto, a mature Chinotto plant, is grafted onto a rootstock. And they're joined together to become one plant, and from here up it's our Chinotto, and from here down it is the obovideo, or, if I'm not mistaken, the grapefruit. With that said, the characteristics and the reason why you would use this particular rootstock is because in Florida, in our area, this is the best one that's disease resistant, and also can handle fungal issues in the soil. It can handle either soil that tends to be a little more dry, maybe it's resistant to nematodes. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you want to use a specific rootstock. Let me ask you guys something. What else are you growing in containers? Do you grow what? Let's specifically narrow it down to citrus. Do you grow any kumquats? Do you grow any calamundins? Do you grow key limes? What do you grow in containers, and how are you doing with that? Is it working out for you? Okay, so besides sunlight, water, fertilizer, pesticides, organic stuff like that we're going to use on our plants, we also have to keep in mind that the pruning of the plant is important. When you're pruning your trees, the way I like to prune them, the way I was taught to prune my trees, is to think about it in this way. Imagine that a bird wants to come in and put a nest in there, okay? You want to have a nice open canopy so that you have plenty of airflow. You don't want to have a bunch of crisscrossing branches, because that causes rubbing and can lead to disease in your plant because it causes the wounds and so on and so on. Basically, you want airflow and you want sunlight to come into the entire canopy of the tree. One of the best ways to achieve that is by looking at your tree carefully every couple of months or so. Just check it out. Go in there and do some selective pruning. So since I've already cleaned this with alcohol, I'm going to show you one branch that should be pruned out. So any branches that are growing into the tree inwards, I'm going to take out. So I would remove this branch, but it's got fruit, so I'm leaving it alone. I would remove that branch right there, okay, because it's growing into the tree. I would remove this branch right over here. Now I can remove this even though it has fruit, because there's so much fruit on this tree that I actually want to thin it out a little bit so that I end up with the maximum size fruit possible. So I will come in here, we'll take that out, and there's no need to seal it or do anything, not really. Some people think it's important to do that. It's up to you if you like doing it or not. There's a lot of little products on the market. If you cut it in the right spot, you'll be fine. I've pretty much covered a lot of information about the Chinotto plant. If I left anything out, if you think there's anything important, then leave a little comment. Hey, thank you for coming by the channel. Share the video out there on social media if you have a minute, and give us a thumbs up if you like it.